this time that we're living in, there seems to be a real lack of understanding of what this force is. You know, there seems to be a kind of wishy-washy interpretation of this wonderful, innate inner power that we all possess. I mean, think about it. Sometimes you will see mothers, unfortunately, seeing their kids being trapped in a car, and with that instinctive love that they have for their child, they're able to lift a car up. You hear this often happening, not just accidents. This this happened to my own family. A very similar story. My son, I was on my way to Saudi Arabia, and my two sons were swimming in the sea in Kefalonia. And anyway, when I got to Saudi Arabia, my wife and I went on a Skype call, and she said, "Steve, something really severe happened today." And I thought, oh, by the look of her face, I could tell that it was, very serious. But then she assured me, no, but it's fine, but it was really serious. And then she said, both Daniel and Nathaniel were drowning in the sea, and the eldest son, Nathaniel, managed to swim to the shore. Daniel must have been 7 or 8 years of age at the time. And he was drowning, and about 100 feet or 100 meters away from where Lani was, my wife, who was at the shore. And she's not a good swimmer, and she didn't trust her swimming to save Daniel. So all she could do is desperately watch her son 100 feet, 100 meters away, and watch him slowly just sink under these currents that were pulling him under. Now, Daniel's story was, as I started struggling and swallowing water, I knew I didn't have enough strength, so he gave up. And Lani said that she saw the possibility of his life, life pass, and in a split second she was thinking, what would a life without Daniel be like? And in that moment, she looked at him, and she determined with all her might, with all her faith, with all her strength, with all her love, that she wasn't going to let him drown. And what she says, in that moment, one wave pushed him halfway into her, but the second wave, she described, was like a wave of love. It was like an angelic wave of love that pushed Daniel, and he landed in the palm of her hands, and he was saved. The next day, he was back back swimming without any form of damage. And he believes to this day, Daniel believes to this day, that one of the key lessons that he learned was to let go, to trust, that somehow in the letting go, he was trusting that deep love that he felt in that moment was going to bring him home. And on the other hand, the mother was trusting that incredible sense of love, but backed with faith and determination, because love always transforms into something, always does. You always get love and kindness, or love and compassion, or love and courage. Well, her love transformed into a determination, an absolute determined force that somehow reached through the ocean and brought Daniel back home. That's a beautiful story of what love can do, and it's a very, very true story. If you speak to Daniel or Nathaniel that was there, or my son Daniel, he'll tell you. I was on my way to the Middle East, and I was only told when I got to Saudi Arabia what had happened. So that's a real life demonstration. So I know how I know the power of love, and I want to talk to you about this, because a lot of people talk about power, a lot of people talk about inner power, but they don't realize that the inner power that they're really talking about is the very force that has conceived us all. Because all of us are here. If you look around, wherever we look, we see elements of love everywhere. You can capture a beautiful sunrise in the morning or a beautiful sunset, and you sense this awesome sense of light and warmth and heat, this rays touching you. And it's awesome, but it's also comforting, it's powerful, and yet it's just warm. So love has that texture, it has that power. You know, it's very kind of corporate, but it's individual. It's very interwoven, and yet it's absolutely awesome. And what I mean by that is that you can see in the way that the earth yields its seed and the trees give off its, you know, vast array of fruits, and how they hang off the trees. It's like, you know, branches just with their arms spread wide saying, look, eat. And when you spread a wonderful table of fruits, of melons, of berries, of strawberries, of raspberries, of the vast vegetation that we have, and you taste the goodness, you can see the awesomeness of that. It wouldn't exist without the sun and the ocean and the seas, and yet when it comes in the form of a little strawberry, you taste the goodness of the all in that. And that's what I'm trying to explain here about love. Love is a very powerful force. A lot of people are always trying to develop, you know, inner power, and they're always trying to develop even things like faith, you know, and they quote texts like, faith grows like a mustard seed, but faith grows with love. You cannot have faith and not have love, you know. And there's a beautiful saying in the New Testament that says you can have the gift of angels, you can have works, you can do this, you can do that, but if you don't have love, it means nothing. And what I want to bring you back into today is your core center. What is that core center? What is that nature? So, you know, when I'm saying sitting and abiding in stillness, in your true nature, in your zero, what is it at essence? At essence, it's love. It might be covered with a sense of chaos or confusion or hurt or letdown or scars of rejection or even abuse. But beyond it all, as you pass through it all, right in the center, the essence, your essence, the essence of all things is this force that I call love, that we call love. And a beautiful description of love, because I've said that this force love has to be, for it to be real, for us to measure whether it's real, you can't just say I love you and there not be a demonstration, an outworking of that love. There has to be evidence of that love, right? So love is always accompanied with something else. So you will hear love is patient, it's kind, it does not envy, nor does it boast, it's not proud, it doesn't dishonor others. You see, here we have a wonderful description. It's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrong, it doesn't rejoice or delight in evil, but rather rejoices in truth. It always protects. You know, this is another one that I'd like to talk a little bit about. A lot of people nowadays, they say, oh, you know, there's a lot of people thinking, you know, they might be attacked. What do you do if I'm a Christian? Do I turn the other cheek? No, because love protects, love covers, love defends, love, you know, honors the weak. It protects. You know, people have a wrong conception about what love is. You know, love is a protective force. Ask any mother, ask any loving father. love never fails. It never fails because it's complete. That's why it never fails. It never seeks revenge, nor does it gossip. Love lays its life down. It holds no grudges. It covers all wrong. So you can see it's a force that never fatigues, never gets tired. It's full, it's complete, and it has all those components that I've said. So you can see by that description that this force that I'm talking about is very powerful and is required, in my opinion, more now than at any other time. Now, one other thing I'd like to mention about love is that love always respects and honors free will. In other words, your space, your individuality, who you are. Love never opposes its laws down on you. Love always, it does the opposite. It gives you the freedom to discover, to explore, to think for yourself, to be who you are. Because I've always said this, who you are is who you are. And in my opinion, when you apply this law, I've been married for 23 years and I've had 3 beautiful kids, and my experience of parenting has been unbelievable. My kids are my best friends and my best teachers, and I believe they've become like that because I applied this law. And the law I'm talking about is the law of allowing them to be who they are through the law of love. So what I did was I said to my wife, all we're going to do is we're going to put a sand pit. We're going to raise our kids with a sand pit mentality. In other words, we're just going to allow them to be. And the sand pit is going to be the fragrance of love that we have for them. That's what it's going to be. Our sand is going to be the love that we have for them. And so, of course, like any kids, they grew up with their own trials, with their own tribulations, with their own mistakes, but knowing that there was a sandpit in the house, meaning there was a safety, there was a protection. If they fell, they knew they would be safe. They knew there was always someone to lean on, someone to cry on, someone to seek advice from. The environment that we created was one that was encouraging and freeing and respecting their free will, and of course, there was times where that love would need to apply some wisdom, meaning discipline, or there would be, but to be honest with you, very little times, because I honestly believe when you apply this law of love that people discover who they are, and in that discovery they learn very quickly what their boundaries are. So if I had to raise my voice, very few times, because they knew that this invisible beautiful current that was flowing in my house was enough, so they could talk to me. They didn't feel that they had to manipulate. They didn't feel that they had to cheat. They didn't feel they had to lie. They didn't feel they had to exaggerate, because the law of love is forgiving. The law of love is encouraging. The law of love listens to. The law of love, really listens. When someone loves you, they really listen to you. They're not speaking over you, or they're speaking under you, or they're speaking in between what you're saying. They're really listening to you. So this law, this sandpit was applied. I'm just using the sandpit because the sandpit reminds me of kids playing, and they normally have a sandpit, and sometimes you see these kind of play bars where kids can run, jump, and knowing that when they fall, they're protected. So that was kind of the law that I applied. So this force is very, very powerful. There's a story in the Gospel of John, chapter 8. It's a beautiful story, one of my favorite stories. And I remember one of my teachers was telling this story, and she always had a rock, a stone, on the edge of her table. And she told it like this. She said, there was a certain woman who, for whatever reason, had become a prostitute. And the law of the land said that if you were found guilty of adultery, or you were to be stoned, and you would be stoned to death. And so anyway, this woman comes running out with a huge crowd, and in the midst of the crowd were these religious rulers. They were the heads of the religion, the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees, and they knew the Torah. And in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy, I think it's chapter 20, if you were caught in adultery, or if you were a prostitute, and you were caught, you would be stoned, and that meant stoned to death. So this was a serious offense. And so anyway, this crowd comes running out, and this woman comes running, and she falls at the feet of Christ. And all of a sudden, the crowd and these religious rulers, they suddenly pick up stones to stone her. And they question Jesus, and they say, look, this woman has been caught in adultery. You know, according to the law written in Deuteronomy, that she should be stoned to death. What do you think? And suddenly this overwhelming sense of guilt and shame and exposure and condemnation, and this sense of religious pride that was in the air, and a sense of unforgiveness that goes with that, was hailing, stone her, stone her. And suddenly, Christ, in his mercy, in his love, and love always does this, it always finds solutions, it always finds answers, it always stoops low. It says that Jesus wrote on the ground, and he touched the earth, and love always touches the earth. It always, like a seed, it always humbles itself because it respects humility. And I could just feel in this story Jesus placing his heart on the heartbeat of this woman who was broken at his feet, and probably thinking that she was going to be stoned to death. I could just sense his humility, his coming down and sensing her brokenness. And in that moment, wisdom burst forth, and he said, he who's without sin, cast the first stone. And stone by stone, each person dropped. And as they were dropping, the stones were touching the floor, and stone by stone, she was being freed. She was being freed. You can just feel that. I don't know how many stones. The text doesn't give you the description of how many stones, but who knows? But I know that she was just feeling this sense of liberation and liberty, and this sense of covering, and this sense of being cared for, and not only cared for, but protected. And suddenly Jesus looked at her and says, woman, you are free. Now sin no more. And love always speaks honestly. It's always truthful. It covers, it protects. You can see here, it covers, it protects. It's filled with wisdom. It's not afraid. It's complete. And later on, we find that this woman became a wonderful woman, a powerful woman, a wonderful individual, and fulfilled her full potential. So love always has this wonderful power, this component, and it's in all of us.